The late afternoon sun hung low over the Texas plains, bleeding gold across the tall grass that swayed like an ocean of fire. Clara squinted as she turned off the long dirt road, her old blue truck rattling with every dip and bump. It had been years, 5, maybe 6, since she'd driven this way. The path was familiar, but everything about it felt heavier now, like a place soaked in memories she'd tried to forget. When she reached the wooden gate marked Whitaker Ranch, her chest tightened. The sign was cracked and sun-faded, hanging slightly crooked on one rusted hinge. She stopped the truck and stared for a moment before pushing the gate open. The hinges groaned in protest, as if warning her that she didn't belong here anymore. But she went through anyway. As the truck rolled toward the barn, the landscape seemed both endless and suffocating, golden fields stretching in every direction, a few distant cattle grazing under the dying sun. The smell of earth and hay drifted through the open window, thick and nostalgic. Every sound, the wind, the engine, even the hum of crickets, seemed amplified by the quiet isolation of the ranch. The barn appeared on the horizon, exactly where it had always stood, but it looked older now. The red paint had faded to a dull rust, and ivy crept up one side like nature was slowly reclaiming it. She parked near the entrance and climbed out, brushing the dust off her jeans. Her boots sank slightly into the soft dirt as she walked toward the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of hay, oil, and old memories. Light filtered through the cracks in the roof, scattering into beams that danced with dust motes. The sound of a single horse shifting in its stall echoed softly. Clara's hand grazed the rough wood of a support beam as she stepped further in, her heartbeat quickening with every step. Then came the low, unmistakable sound of a man's whistle. She froze. That sound had a way of pulling her back years, back to long summer nights, laughter under the stars, and promises that had never quite been kept. She turned toward the sound, and there he was. Jake Whitaker. He was leaning against the barn post, a piece of straw in his mouth and a smirk that hadn't changed one bit. His shirt was half-buttoned, sleeves rolled up, his forearms streaked with sweat and dust from a day's work. The years had carved strength into his face, the kind that comes from hard labor and harder lessons. "Didn't think you'd come back," he said, voice low and rough, like gravel and honey. Clara crossed her arms, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. "I said I would," she replied, though the words felt unsteady on her tongue. He nodded toward the horse she'd brought, a young, chestnut mare with nervous eyes and a restless shuffle. "She's a fine one," Jake said. "But green. Gonna take a steady hand." Clara lifted the saddle from the truck bed, her muscles tightening under its weight. "That's the plan," she said, setting it down on the barn floor. It was a beautiful saddle. Smooth leather, hand-tooled with intricate patterns, but far too big for the small horse. Jake watched silently as she adjusted the straps and ran her hand along the mare's neck. When she tried to lift the saddle, it slipped awkwardly and thudded against the horse's flank. The mare snorted, stamping nervously. Clara stepped back, frustrated. "Guess it's too big," she muttered, brushing hair from her face. "Doesn't look like it'll fit." Jake pushed off the post and walked over, slow and steady. The distance between them shrank until she could smell the faint mix of leather, sweat, and cedar soap clinging to him. He stopped beside her, eyes on the saddle, but his voice softened when he spoke. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe you're just not giving it a fair chance." Clara looked up at him, her pulse quickening again. "You think you can make it fit?" Jake met her eyes, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. "I reckon we'll see," he said, his voice dropping lower. And as the barn settled into silence again, just the creak of wood, the breath of the horse, and the heat between them, Clara realized that what didn't fit once might just fit perfectly now. Jake reached for the saddle with that same calm confidence that used to drive Clara crazy. His hands were rough and steady, the kind of hands that knew work, real work. He brushed the dust off the leather, his thumb tracing the hand-carved details she'd spent weeks perfecting. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was thick, charged, like the air before a storm. "Hold her steady," he murmured, stepping closer. Clara moved to the mare's head, her fingers gripping the bridle as she whispered soothing words. She could feel Jake's presence behind her, close enough that she could sense the heat of his body, the rhythm of his breath. The horse shifted, but Jake didn't flinch. He lifted the saddle again, this time with a measured patience that came from years of handling creatures far more stubborn than either of them. When the leather settled onto the mare's back, the sound was soft, almost tender. Jake's movements were sure, practiced. His fingers adjusted the straps with quiet precision, and for a moment, Clara forgot about everything, the years apart, the arguments, the regret. All she could see was the way his jaw flexed as he tightened the cinch, the way his forearms moved under the rolled sleeves of his worn shirt. "See," he said finally, looking up with a slow grin. "Told you it'd fit just fine." Clara let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "You always were too sure of yourself." "Still am," Jake replied, brushing off his hands. "But sometimes, I'm right." Their eyes met again, and something in the air shifted. The distance that had stretched between them all those years seemed to shrink, pulled tight by something unspoken. Clara tried to look away, but she couldn't. He'd always had that effect. Steadfast, grounded, and entirely too sure of what he wanted. "You never change," she said quietly. He tilted his head. "And you did." That hit harder than she expected. She swallowed, glancing away toward the open barn door. The sun had nearly set, painting everything in gold and amber. The breeze carried the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. It should have felt peaceful, but her heart was racing. Jake stepped closer again, slow and deliberate. His voice dropped, softer now. "You didn't come all the way out here just to check a saddle, Clara." She didn't answer right away. Her throat felt tight. "Maybe I didn't," she said finally. "But it's a start." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled. Not the teasing grin she remembered, but something quieter, almost hopeful. "Then it's a good start." The horse snorted softly, shaking its mane, breaking the silence. Jake gave the saddle one last pat, then looked at Clara again. "Fits better than I thought," he said, his tone light but his eyes deep. Clara stepped beside him, her hand brushing against his as they both reached for the bridle. The touch was fleeting, but enough to send a pulse of warmth through her chest. "Guess you were right," she whispered. Jake's lips curved into that familiar half-smile. "Told you," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "Some things just take time." Outside, the last of the sunlight faded over the fields, wrapping the old barn in a soft, golden glow. Inside, the air hummed with quiet understanding, of old wounds, second chances.